because Uganda is gaining its freedom without bitterness, at its own request, becoming an immediate member of the Commonwealth.
Uganda is a country located in East Africa with a population of 37 million people. 75% of the population are the youth, and 80% of the youth in Uganda are unemployed and live in absolute poverty, earning less than $1 a day. In 1986, President Yoweri Museveni came into power after overthrowing dictatorial regimes.
That what is happening today, or what has been happening in
the years that followed, the president embarked on various reforms and promised to cause a fundamental change.
I think this is a fundamental change in the politics of our country.
And the tries to do that will be smashed completely. Completely. He would not even remain.
It is now 30 years of President Museveni in power, and the fundamental change he talked about remains a mere rhetoric. The country is now characterized with absolute poverty, high unemployment, poor health sector, poor education system, human rights abuse, persecution of opposition politicians, high level of intimidation and state patronage, corruption, lack of functioning state institutions, sectarianism, tribalism, high cost of living, high taxation, collapse of industrial and manufacturing sector, huge public spending, increasing external debt burden, to mention but a few. At the beginning of 2014, a group of youth, now known as the Uganda Poor Youth Movement, formed a movement that came out to voice their concern about the above problems. The Uganda Poor Youth started to mobilize and organize themselves countrywide, and on 18th February 2014, they held their first press conference in Kampala, Uganda. At this press conference, the youth opposed the resolution which the parliamentary caucus of the ruling National Resistance Movement had just adopted in Chankwan's Leadership Institute, in which they confirmed President Museveni as the sole party candidate in the National Resistance Movement in the 2016 presidential elections.
We can support President Yoweri Museveni.
The Uganda Poor Youth also vehemently nominated the then Prime Minister Right Honorable Amama Mbabazi and urged him to run for presidency of Uganda in the 2016 presidential election.
And there is no going back.
Go forward.
Go forward.
They are intimidating my body, the brain, and my heart. Cannot be intimidated by anybody in this country.
It was after this press conference that President Yoweri Museveni, through his security and state agencies, unleashed brutality, intimidation, and some of the top founding members of the Poor Youth Movement, such as Luzindana Adam Buyinza and Willie Omodo, were arrested and remanded in Luzira prison on accusation of collecting signatures from the people of Uganda to convene a conference to oppose the tyrannical rule of President Museveni. The formation of the Uganda Poor Youth Movement is currently directly linked to the former Prime Minister Amama Mbabazi and retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye. However, sources believe that this movement began way back in 2004 in Makerere University. It has been linked to the late Brigadier Noble Mayom, who was by that time Director of the Chieftaincy of Military Intelligence, Amama Mbabazi, who was Minister of Defense, and to the late General Aronda Nyakairima, who was the Chief of Defense Forces of the UPDF. The group has continued to operate covertly and overtly in executing political missions across the country, with known founding members such as Luzindana Adam Buyinza as the group's supreme leader and founding chairman. Amama Mbabazi as their presidential candidate.
I come before you today to tell you that I'll be seeking your vote.
Kizza Besigye as their admirer, Welsimbi Shakul, Issa Kato, Omodo, Kategere Thomas, Kagwa Vincent, Hassan Mochibi, Ben Sebuguzi, Anyine Janet, Chilechankuba Richard, Kalinda Idi, Aquil Nora, William Seruyinda, Chidiowa Andrew, Kaziwe Bashir, Kitmus Musa, Semakula Yasin, to mention but a few. The youth movement has district and sub-county coordinators, and with formal and informal structures running to the village level across the country. The group is working tirelessly to organize and empower 100 poor youth per village to vote Mama Mbabazi and safeguard their votes in February 2016 presidential election. However much some of the members have been intimidated or compromised by the regime, their struggle seems to be progressing. The great attribute of this youth movement is the existence of coordinators in different parts of the world and the existence of working relations with key development partners and agents of democracy in Uganda. The group has continued to conduct massive recruitment of job seekers, graduates, students and youth in slums and youth in rural trading centers. In part 2 of our public broadcast, we shall bring you the voice and the life of a poor youth in Uganda and what the Uganda Poor Youth Movement has done towards liberation of Uganda from the dictatorial rule of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who has led Uganda since 1986.
What is affecting our colleagues in NRM affects all of us, and that we must stand together for justice, we stand together for freedom, we stand together for human dignity.
If Kaihura continues antagonizing the youth of this country, we are going to take him to the East African Court, we are going to take him to the ICC.
When a leader tries to change the rules in the middle of the game just to stay in office, it risks instability and strife, as we've seen in Burundi. And this is often just a first step down a perilous path. And sometimes you'll hear a leader say, well, I'm the only person who can hold this nation together. If that's true, then that leader has failed to truly build their nation. You look at Nelson Mandela. Madiba, like George Washington, forged a lasting legacy, not only because of what they did in office, but because they were willing to leave office and transfer power peacefully. And just as the African Union has condemned coups and illegitimate transfers of power, the AU's authority and strong voice can also help the people of Africa ensure that their leaders abide by term limits and their constitutions. Nobody should be president for life.